Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New Orleans bass pianist David Torkanowsky and clarinetist Evan Christopher as they talk about COVID-19 and the new world of jazz. More specifically, they open up about their live stream on Sunday, April 19th at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can go to clarinetroad.com to access it. It's the new way to play jazz here in 2020. They discuss this and so much more, so please get to know them and dig this interview.
Let's just be hopeful for better things. One of the reasons why I'm actually reaching out to everybody is because I think it's probably going to be cathartic for all to discuss and think about something other than kind of the state of this very unique place in history that we have right now. So thanks for taking a minute out.
Sure.
I appreciate you guys doing this. And I do want to bring up, I guess, what's ever present is this first live stream you have on Sunday, April the 19th. So kind of just talk to me about your guys' working relationship, what's coming up, that kind of thing.
Well, I can tell you that my last public performance was with David on March 13th, Friday the 13th, and that was the last public performance I had. I shut some things down in those few days, and then the city did the rest of the work for me. I've lost pretty much all my work all the way through July now that France has extended their lockdown. And David and I have been behaving ourselves. We've been self-isolating, and we're kind of making our first foray into the live streaming stuff. He did a solo show honoring Ellis Marsalis, and we just think it's time to kind of jump on the horse now that the novelty seems to be waning a little bit, and the field isn't so crowded, and we've got David's got the technical know-how, and we've developed some infrastructure to make sure that things are a little better quality.
Very cool.
Hopefully that remains to be seen. We'll know after Sunday. But Evan and I really enjoy playing together. We just finished a record, there's a lot of people are doing, obviously, for obvious reasons, solo things on the internet, but, duo collaborations are doable, with proper distancing and kind of a picture-in-picture concept where people get an idea of how a duo, in other words, I think we can go a lot of different places, and there's, I think it's going to be well received. I have high hopes.
New Orleans music has a lot of, it offers a lot. It's more than just, hey, let's watch musicians play. I mean, I think New Orleans music offers a sense of community, and the duo format can offer the sense of intimacy. I think that there's just a lot of connection that I think people look for when they come to New Orleans, and now that they're not coming, I think, however we can simulate that, I think is kind of the goal, to emphasize some of the values that our cultural community holds. And I like, the variety of music, and the fact that we have this new recording that's basically in boxes blocking my hallway. We're also trying to figure out how to. For us, it's recalibrating not only our own careers, but it's recalibrating our relationship to the people who love New Orleans.
I gotta say, another thing that sets the music we play apart is that people, especially now in the period of uncertainty, are longing for a connection, and the connection that New Orleans music offers people is. Maybe they don't realize it, but they feel it. It's a connection to the ancestry of this music, and we're paying homage in the way we play the music, and in fact the music that we play, we're paying homage to our musical ancestors. And while that sounds a bit frilly, it informs the music in a way that makes it compelling, and people seek it out. Even people that might not be fans of the style of music feel a certain connection to it because of that.
For me, my favorite thing about working with David is kind of that he comes from the piano a little bit similar to the way I've been trying to come from the clarinet, which is exactly what he's talking about. It's the history and the relationship to the tradition is always evident, no matter what he's playing. And I think that when I first moved here in the mid '90s, I imagined that I would be dealing more with the traditional music of New Orleans, but what I figured out is that once you try to plant your voice just within the history of the tradition of your instrument, it actually doesn't matter what type of music you're playing or whose music or how contemporary it is. And that's something that I've learned from David is that. Well,
I learned that from older musicians here. Traditional is not a style; it's an attitude. Like there was a great band here called the Storyville Jazz Band. Elvis Marcellus was the pianist. There was a great drummer in L.A. George French. Mm-hmm. All of these cats, they play these traditional forms, whether it be the trios like original Dixieland one step or all of these things. They play them completely faithful to how they were written. Absolutely, playing marches when they need to be marches. But when it came time to solos, they sounded like Miles cooking at the Plug Nickel. They just said, "Fuck it, now we're playing." And it was just such a dichotomy. It was such an eye-opening thing. Well, wait a minute, how can y'all sound so hip when it just sounded so, not dated, but it just sounded so constrained and disciplined a second ago, and now all of this, and it was like that was their thing. So, and in a lesser sense, the great Creole clarinetist Louis Cottrell did the same thing with his band. I mean, they just played the forms, and when it came time to play, it was smooth and cool and just not Dixieland, but
yeah, you're talking about the Heritage Hall band, and yeah,
right.
That was kind of that actually was there was cognitive dissonance for me when I thought that I was coming in that in the traditional music that a rhythm section played a certain way, and then to hear bands to learn about I didn't hear Cottrell's Heritage Hall band live, but I knew some musicians and I knew what their background was, and there was actually very little interest in in using some of that more dated rhythmic vocabulary, and so I kind of learned to love that about it too.
Yeah, the one thing that's always unique about New Orleans, and that it's kind of akin to Kansas City, is that history and that lore, and it's not just simply a show. There's so much more that goes into it, and I know I've tuned into some online things, and it's been refreshing to see. So, I think one of the things that's kind of an outgrowth of this is being a little centric to the whole idea of COVID-19, and I want to ask you guys, this is a very unique time we're living through. We may never live through it again. And my question to you is this: when we do get back to live music, which I know a lot of musicians are hurting, and this is a huge time of uncertainty, not only for the human species, but for musicians, because they rely on that paycheck in a different way than people that are 9-to-5ers or other people. My question is what do you hope we realize? What revelations do you hope both musician and audience member gets from this experience, so when we do return to live music, maybe we're a little bit better and wiser?
Well, that it's playing music and playing music for people and creating an income and revenue stream from art is a privilege. I miss it. I think that when we get back to playing and people are congregating in closed spaces to hear us do so, I'm just writing an email to somebody looking at buying a club in New Orleans. It's like, there's going to be necessary changes, like the HVA system's going to have ozone sterilization filters. Maybe there's people getting their temperature taken as they walk through the door. It's going to be a little uncertain at first, but people will come out to be transported by the music, and we feel confident about that. That we're just like very much like Katrina, just after Katrina in this city. People need music and heal.
Yeah, that's definitely a healing process. I have three quick things to that question, and they're all from different parts. I think on one hand, from the musician's point of view, I think they're quickly figuring out, the infrastructure that we don't have and we lack, and that we should have been developing once David mentioned the failure of the federal levees after Katrina, and we've had 15 years to start to figure some of this stuff out, and haven't really made very much progress. So I think from the musician standpoint, I think the realization of the breadth of what they do to put themselves in a position of being able to have that, that's a great way to put it, David, that privilege of music making. I think there's more that goes into it than just saying, oh, well, here I am with my instrument, here I am, world. I don't think that's going to work anymore. From the local point of view, I think we're quickly going to realize that we cannot be so dependent on visitorship. And that's they put all their eggs in one basket for the last 15 years. And now I think we're seeing how much that you combine that overdependence on tourism with the austerity measures that we've had since Jingle, and you see kind of the worst case combination of lacking infrastructure for the people who live here. And then third, for the people who love New Orleans and love the music, I just think that I think we just have to accept that there will be not only different ways to engage, but there will be different requirements to engage, and it's not going to be just, well, I'm going to go to New Orleans and have my soul fed and say goodbye. I think people are going to start to figure out that the health of the cultural community and the health of that relationship and that connection that David mentioned is going to be dependent on a more dynamic relationship to the city and to the musicians that they want to support. So that's all I have to say about that. There's kind of three different sides of it that I think all we're going to be figuring out pretty quick here.
Yeah, and it's still kind of weird to think about, March 12th and 13th. I saw Bill Frisell came through town, I think on the 3rd or 4th, and he played at the Nelson Atkins Art Museum, and it's weird. I feel, now that I look back on it, at the very end of the show, they started singing We Shall Overcome, and the crowd spontaneously stood up and started singing in unison, as if some ways cerebrally we knew something was coming, and it's just weird to think how free that show was. I ran into a musician that was going to Paris for 2 weeks, and then he had to run home, and just that feeling. And it's like, I think that's the thing that now that we're further into it than we were before. I think the thing that's frightening now is, when exactly is it going to happen and how much is going to change because of it. I mean, with 9/11, we knew the world was going to be different, but it was going to be localized in airports in different areas and places that were kind of central to how that happened. This is everything. Libraries, schools, jazz venues. Every facet of our lives are going to be altered because of this thing that's happened. And that's the thing that's interesting. And I think I've heard from a lot of Kansas City musicians, hopefully clubs can open back up. Hopefully they can do it. And hopefully crowds will come out if they even have money, So it's interesting to look back and just think, just on March 12th or 13th, life was just the way it was, and now a month later, it's radically different.
Yeah, I think that's the scariest part, is to see, who's going to get left behind in all of this. And when it comes to our culture bears, we know exactly what the tendencies are as to who ends up moving forward. In New Orleans, I think it's still probably close to a quarter of the population doesn't have access to computers, doesn't have access to a car. I mean, if it's not a quarter, it's a fifth. I mean, it's pretty dramatic. And even filling out some applications for assistance and things like that. Well, how in isolation are we able to reach the culture bears, Mardi Gras Indians, brass band musicians, social aid and pleasure clubs? I mean, how are we able to help those communities right now if they don't have access to decent internet? And so I'm pretty concerned about what the overall health of the cultural community will be, not just the musicians. I think the idea that musicians are just hopeful that the clubs will reopen, I think, is a bit short-sighted and a little bit naive. I think in all facets, not only is it going to be necessary to come up with a new paradigm, it's going to be necessary to go back and forth between these two modes, because I don't think anybody thinks that once this is over, it's over. We kind of need to figure out how to go back and forth between these two, this kind of these different relationships, as opposed to whether the club's going to open again. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hey, gentlemen, thank you for taking a minute out today. Good luck with everything with the live stream. Stay safe. Keep the music going. And I appreciate you, taking some time out today.
Thank you. I'll send you the...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for, hyping our stream this Sunday. We need all the help we can get.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in New Orleans, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that necessary jazz. And thanks to Evan and David for their time and their stream. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.